Hello everyone, my name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute. Thanks for joining me for Preston's Ponderings. Well, it's been a while since we've been involved in our study of Matthew 16:27 and 28, so we want to continue those studies. In those verses, Jesus said, "The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, and shall reward every man according to his works. Verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." You know, we've looked at the Old Testament background and source for this prophecy and demonstrated that it has to do with Israel's last days, not the end of the Christian age. It has to do and was limited to the fulfillment of the Roman Empire. It has to do with martyr vindication, which Jesus confined to the first century generation. Well, needless to say, these verses have perplexed and continue to perplex Bible students throughout the ages. Jesus unequivocally seems to be saying that his coming with the angels in judgment would be in the lifetime of that audience. One of the most popular, one of the most common objections to seeing the fulfillment of Jesus' prediction in the first century is to say this: well, look, yes, Jesus said, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. But that was fulfilled some 6 days later, when on the mountain of Transfiguration, Peter, James, and John were privileged to see Jesus transfigured before them. Thus, Jesus made the prophecy of his coming in the kingdom with power and great glory in the lifetime of some standing there. And 6 days later, we are told, the disciples saw a vision of his coming, and that supposedly fulfilled Jesus' prediction. Well, let's take a couple of quick notices about what that means. Notice number one, Jesus did not say, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see a vision of the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. He said, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Not a vision of that. Point number two, Jesus said, and remember, this is really critical here, folks. Mark chapter 8 and into chapter 9 reveals that there was a really, really large multitude present when Jesus made this prediction. And Jesus said, there are some standing here which shall not die. Now, folks, look. If there's a huge multitude present, and the speaker says, some standing here will live to see this event, that means by the very nature of language, it infers without any doubt whatsoever that the most will not live to see that event. Well, Peter, James, and John went up with Jesus on the mountain. Are they the only three that lived for that 6 days? Are we supposed to believe that the great majority of that audience, that multitude that was present according to Mark chapter 8, are we supposed to believe that the majority of those people died during that 6-day interim? No, language is not going to allow this. Point number three. We are told the Transfiguration is indeed the fulfillment, a visionary fulfillment of Jesus' prediction. Now, make no mistake, I believe that the Transfiguration was a visionary confirmation of Jesus' then yet future parousia, his second coming. Not future to us, but future to him then. So there's no question that the Transfiguration was a vision of Jesus' second coming. That's what Peter said in 2 Peter chapter 2 Peter chapter 1, when defending the doctrine of Christ's second coming, he said, we have not followed cunningly devised fables when we made known unto you the power and the parousia, the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. We were with him on the mount. We saw him on the mountain, and we heard this great voice saying, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Now notice this. Peter says, in preaching the doctrine of the second coming being denied by the scoffers, Peter says, we have this prophetic word made more sure. We were with him in the mountain. We saw a vision of the second coming, which refutes the scoffers, by the way. Now, follow me very closely here. Peter says, he and the other apostles saw a vision of the second coming on the mountain. Therefore, the Transfiguration was, in fact, a vision of the second coming of Christ. Now, mind you, Peter did not say that the Transfiguration was the fulfillment of Jesus' prediction in Matthew 16:27 and 28. He does say that the Transfiguration was a vision of what the scoffers were denying and what he was still preaching. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting. What was the Transfiguration? Well, the Transfiguration was, number one, a vision of the second coming. No question about that. That's what Peter says over here in 2 Peter chapter 1. Point number two, this is where it gets really, really critical. You see, all three futurist eschatologies tell us the Transfiguration is a vision of the end of the Christian age. It's the end of the gospel age. It's the end of the church age, okay? Hang on to that. Premillennial, postmillennial, and amillennial all say second coming of Christ, foretold in Matthew 16:27, the end of the Christian age. Okay, Peter says the Transfiguration was a vision of the second coming. It should have been, therefore, a vision of the end of the Christian age, right? Second coming is the end of the Christian age, according to all three futurist eschatologies. Peter says, Transfiguration, a vision of the second coming. Therefore, Transfiguration should have been a vision of the end of the Christian age. But what was envisioned in the Transfiguration? Well, here's Moses and Elijah and Jesus. Moses and Elijah appear in glory. Oh, wait a minute. What does Moses and Elijah represent? The law and the prophets. In other words, Torah, the Old Covenant, the law of Moses. Peter says, Lord, it's great for us to be here because he sees Jesus, he sees Moses, he sees Elijah. Lord, it's great for us to be here. Let's build 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. And about that time, even as he's speaking, Luke records, Moses and Elijah fade away, and what's known as the Bath coal, the voice from heaven says, this, speaking of Jesus, is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. Well, in the Greek, that's in the emphatic, which literally means him, hear. In contrast to Moses and Elijah, Jesus is set forth as the spokesman. In other words, the Transfiguration, notice, Moses and Elijah fade away. Jesus is transcendent, meaning that the Transfiguration was a vision of the end of the law of Moses. It was a vision of the end of Moses and the prophets. It is a vision of the transcendence of Christ as the new covenant spokesman. Wait a minute, folks. All three futurist eschatologies tell us the second coming is the end, in other words, the fading away of the new covenant age of Jesus Christ. Peter says the Transfiguration was a vision of the second coming. But the Transfiguration was not a vision of the end of the Christian age. It was a vision of the end of Moses and Elijah, i.e. the Old Covenant age. Now listen to me. Since the Transfiguration was a vision of the second coming of Christ, since all futurist eschatologies say that the second coming is the end of the Christian age, then should not the vision of the Transfiguration have been a vision of the fading away of Jesus? What did Moses and Elijah even have to be there for? No. The Transfiguration was a vision of the end of Moses and the prophets, the end of Torah, the end of the law of Moses. It was not a vision of the end of the Christian age or the end of the gospel. It was a vision of the end of the Old Covenant age, but it was a vision of the end, the vision of the second coming of Christ. That means that wherever you put the second coming of Christ, it is there and not until there that the law of Moses passes away. If you say and if you claim and if you teach The second coming has not yet come to pass. Moses and Elijah are still in effect today. The Transfiguration was visionary confirmation of the coming of the Lord of Matthew 16:27 and 28. No doubt about it. The Transfiguration was a vision of the second coming of Christ. No doubt about it. It's what Peter said. But the Transfiguration was a vision of the passing away of Moses and the prophets, the passing of the Old Covenant law, the Old Covenant age. It was not a vision of the passing of the Christian age. Folks, if you say that the Transfiguration was a vision of the second coming, which virtually everyone does, then you thereby, of necessity, if you place the second coming in the future, you are saying Moses and the prophets endure until the second coming of Christ. But the Transfiguration was not a vision of the passing of the new covenant. It was a vision of the passing of the old. You see, taking the position that the Transfiguration was the fulfillment of Jesus' prediction in Matthew 16:27 and 28 presents absolutely insurmountable problems for all futurist paradigms. It only fits the true preterist eschatology. We'll have more. Thanks for joining us for Preston's Ponderings. We'll see you on the flip side.